Yeah, I hear you.
Go for it.
Making up.
We're on. And you are in the rotation with Suncoast Normal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, my God. All right, hold on a second. Let me see what I can do here. I'm taking off the virtual background so you can see all the garbage in the background.
I could probably do the first hit if you need me to. It's Memorial Day weekend.
Oh my God!
Oh, man. All right. Well, we'll wait for you.
All right, hold on a second.
Wait for you, man. Gary, you had so much to talk about before.
Okay, how's that?
I can hear you.
We can always hear you, Gary.
All right, fantastic. I blame the Russians on that one. Why? Because they're good for it. But are we on now?
Yes.
We've been on for a minute.
We'll cut the rest of it out in post-production. Good morning. It is Sunday. Just any Sunday, but a Sunday that will not stop repeating itself. We are actually in the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day, that day when we honor our fallen heroes by going out and buying lumber at 20% off, or getting the new sale over at Walgreens, or a new mattress, because America is what retail is all about, and that is how we honor our troops. Not exactly the best idea, but we'll discuss that in the rotation. In my soul, you're a corner in my heart. You know, one of the reasons I love Star Trek is they're constantly getting these scripts where they're stuck in a time loop, where they have to keep on going over the same activities over and over again and try to figure out how to get out of the time loop. Welcome to our time loop. We just jumped out. We just started through our own, say, 365th Groundhog Day, but we are now in the rotation. And
I'm just saying, I like the way that this show started more than the last time.
I can tell you that one of the best starts we ever had was when Tommy Chong was on, and we were just bullshitting back and forth, and he comes on just as, I don't know, one of the three of us was calling somebody else a cocksucker. And by the way, this is FCC, so, and it wasn't me. I usually don't use that word, but Tommy thought it was hilarious. That was the first word he heard when he turned on. He thought we were talking to him.
Weren't live though. We weren't live yet though.
We weren't live yet.
But it was the first thing, and then that's probably why he talked to us for like 3 hours after that.
Yeah, we come on, we're just laughing and laughing. Anyways, you'll notice it's a slight change in the lineup here today. We don't have our executive director, Chris. I don't know exactly where he is or what he's doing, but it must be something really important to miss this, because this is going to be a good show. We have, first off, myself. I am the political director for Suncoast Normal. Yeah, well, there you go. He's there and he's gone.
That was really loud. Really loud.
Don't worry, guys. We are semi-professionals. It only looks like chaos. It's actually
the crowd was really excited that you were here, Gary.
Yeah, well, he won't be here. I guarantee it. Anyway,
they're really softer now.
Coming to us from beautiful South Florida, who constantly avoids being part of Central Florida like us. We are the I-4 corridor. You are the the next step down into Dante's Inferno.
We're the acceptable Florida man, quote unquote. So in South Florida, we do things that are closer to normal than the rest of the state.
Here's the thing: is that I no longer live in South Florida, but I went to the University of South Florida, which is up here in Tampa. So I don't get how that works. But
that is cute. Listen, we call Miami University of Miami, and it's not even in the city of Miami. It's in Coral Gables. So there's
it was because when they first chartered the University of South Florida, it was officially South Florida as far as the inhabited area.
Fair enough.
That is where it came, and then we did the addendum, and we brought on Monroe County and everything else above it. So we worked that out. Anyways, to my right, your left, is our deputy director, our master of business administration, Carlos Angel Hermida.
Thank you. Oh, wait. Ah, shit. There you go. Yeah, thank you. These people thought I was like waving at them.
And for those of you who did not see it, Carlos still has the cheat sheet from his what was it, statistics final on his arm that we never washed it off.
That's Bernoulli's.
Now, I always say that we are the masters of cannabis because I have a master in public health. Carlos has a master of business administration, and our disappearing executive director has a master of public administration. Well, guess what? Today, there are still four. Am I correct or am I missing one? Because our guest
Now Gary's
Jacobs.
Indeed. You're breaking up a little bit there, Gary, on my end. I don't know.
What is it? You have a master's in public health and what else?
Yeah, I have a master's in public health and master's in public administration, and I have a law degree.
Oh, dang. So you got 3 graduate degrees.
I have 3 graduate degrees, indeed.
Damn, like technically you're smarter than me, Gary, and Kano combined.
I wouldn't take it that far. Really, all I tell people is that I just have a bunch of student loans and have some degrees to show for it.
or either that, or you love the college life so much you refuse to leave it.
I refused to get out of it, and then when I left, I did something even more brutally miserable, and that's joining the Army. And so I ended up just in basic training and commissioning as an officer. And so it took me like 9 months to commission, and I feel like my commission, information paperwork is a lot more like something I like cherish more than all my degrees. So I could have just used 9 months and did that instead of 10 years of schooling or something crazy.
Well, I still owe $80,000 on my MPH, so I figured if you went into the Army, you probably want to cherish that title too. So should we call you captain?
Not necessary. I got a beard today, so you don't have to do that. It's cool.
Oh, so that's your civvies, the beard.
Exactly.
Well, that works out. But the reason we have Captain Jacobs here is not just because of his military and refusal to leave college, but also because of the fact that he is currently running for the state district in District 35, currently the one being held by Lauren Book, who has done such a great job. She was minority leader of the Senate last year, and looking to fill that immense void and still keep the Senate on track is basically where we're coming from here. We need to make certain that particular district maintains its current status, and we have to have somebody there who is willing to basically be a Renaissance person, because there's so much going on there in South Florida, especially. It's a major voting block for the state. It's a major down ballot race, and we are looking to support Mr. Jacobs here to see if we can't get him back in there and keep the Senate on track, because we're still dealing with a supermajority who is totally off the tracks. I mean, they should, if they were our commuter line, we'd be killing a lot of people over there in South Florida. That is just the way the legislature is right now. We have been dealing with cannabis laws that were made sloppily, and we're still trying to fix them. And that is because of the fact that there's a lot of intonation to do more culture war stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, one of the main reasons why I decided to run.
You decide to jump and the Citizens Initiative, which I'm going to be going into in just a minute, and get into the legislature, a nice part-time job.
So Gary, from what I gather, you're going to get a part-time job with the legislature.
Oh boy,
what was that? You were going.
All the legislature is part-time jobs.
This is true.
All right.
So Rodney, what made you decide to go ahead and run for Senate?
Well, really, it goes back to some of the stuff that you were saying earlier, some of the culture wars that were coming out of Tallahassee. And I felt like at least once a week or once a month, you were looking at some legislation that came out of Tallahassee, and you're asking yourself, who was asking for this? From the Don't Say Gay bills, the book bans, the curriculum changes, things of that nature. We spoke about it earlier. I have two young boys in my house. My wife and I, although we're not sleeping much because of them, we try to give them the best lives that they deserve. And, I kind of looked in the mirror and said, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And I decided to throw my hat in this race, mainly because, for a lot of people that call Florida home, these last 4 years have been pretty abysmal. You really look at it and say, either I'm going to move away from Florida or I'm going to fight for Florida. So I decided to take up the fight. I never strayed away from a fight, and I felt like if I could fight for our country, I could definitely fight for this state. And as we already mentioned as well, I have a lot of resources and information due to my educational background, but also the work that I do in community as well as in police oversight, that I have a different perspective on how professions and industries engage with one another. And that allows me the ability to kind of solve things from a different perspective, both in policy and utilizing collaboration. So for me, it was all of those things. I don't want to leave Florida. I'm the son of a 30-year Army veteran, so all I've known is moving my whole life, and I wasn't about to make that move here. I felt like Florida was too valuable to just give up. So here we are, fighting for what's good. We've been in the race now for almost a year. We started right after Labor Day in 2023, and we've been going hard ever since.
That's one thing I read about you, man, that you're on that police oversight committee. And that's something here in the city of Tampa. Our mayor, Jane Castor, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her or not, but she is a former police officer and former chief of police. I don't know what her fucking title was, but that's one thing that she's been trying to do. She's been trying to get rid of police oversight committees, and she's like, she's gone out saying that Tampa police don't make mistakes and things like that. But
yeah,
regardless of my hatred for Jane Castor, no, it's I think you actually have a bit of insight on how cannabis is being enforced, because you're essentially on a committee whose goal is to police the police.
Yeah, well, really, I'm not on the committee, but I run the department. So I'm our executive director.
Dang.
The way it works, no, the way it works in Miami is that we have a civilian panel of 13 appointed members, and then we have a professional staff led up by myself. On our staff, we have policy analysts, investigators. We have an assistant director and some other things too. So we have a full-time staff that looks over roughly 300 complaints a year about officers involved in misconduct. We investigate those complaints. We do a mediation program as well for low-level offenses. And then we do audit and review of departmental orders and procedures just to ensure that they're upholding best practices. I do have some experience with Jane Castor, and it's slightly surprising that, she's kind of taken this position. She was our independent auditor with the Department of Justice and looking over the city of Miami's use of force practices. And we worked hand in hand with each other for a few years, until the point where the DOJ investigation ended. And she was really supportive of our work down there at the city of Miami. That we interface.
That doesn't surprise me. It's just that Jane Castor is a politician before she's really a cop. So I see her, doing one thing one time and doing another time. I know that you have a relationship with her or whatever, but that she has done that, where she's come out saying that, like, our cops don't make mistakes, guys. Like, come on, like, we don't do this. But I really don't want to talk about Jake.
No, you're good.
What I do want to talk about, I think it's important. Have you seen any issues down there in Miami where cops have used marijuana to exercise misconduct? I hear it happens quite often where, like, I smell something in the car, young man, and then all of a sudden there's like a whole, you know what I mean? Like,
So I mean, you need reasonable suspicion in order to make a stop, essentially. And a lot of times people use the smell or odor of marijuana to have that pretext for a stop. Now, we haven't seen as much of that since the hemp law passed a few years back, in large part because our state attorney determined that we're not going to prosecute these. We'll give us a citation instead. And so at the City of Miami Police, it still may be pretextual for a stop. You still may get stopped based upon the pretext of a smell, but you're not necessarily getting a criminal charge for it. Now, if during that stop they find other illegal activity, then there's it allows for a deeper conversation. But as for the drug offense itself, we've seen less and less of that. And I think that's in large part because our state attorney said we can't tell the difference between hemp or marijuana. There's no way to test for it, at least not in the field. So we're not going to prosecute it.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I think it's important that our citizens are able to, like, I guess it's corny for me to talk about it, and I go on these like stupid rants on the show here, Rodney, but like I have a weird love for the Black Panthers. And, yeah. And I always love the idea of like the people policing the police, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested in these committees sometimes, and like all the issues that we've had with them in Tampa. It's been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. I think it's important that that is Normal's main goal. We've had medical marijuana on our agenda for quite some time, but when Normal started in the 70s, it was just people who are getting arrested for marijuana shouldn't be getting arrested for marijuana. This is a victimless crime. And it's good to hear that it's going down quite a bit, especially with the hemp laws and everything. Do you think like maybe now that they're trying to like crack down on these hemp laws, that like the police will be able to like pick it back up, or you know what I mean?
In South Florida, not necessarily. I think right now our police department is definitely focused on other areas. To your point, early on, I've often said this too, and I feel like we learned this our first year in law school, is that people don't commit crimes, they commit acts, right? People commit actions, and we criminalize those actions based upon who's setting the standards of society, right? And I think right now the standard, at least as it relates to marijuana, at least on the local level, has started to shift. So those actions, in most people's minds, aren't as criminal as they once were. So I think really the big push is decriminalizing the actions of those that use marijuana, both medicinally or for recreational purposes. And I think really that's the position that we should be in looking at this. And obviously getting people the help and care they need if they were criminalized based upon it as well. We've lost generations of people due to incarceration for utilizing and or selling marijuana.
So I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but this guy over here, over to my right, I guess you'd say, is he spends a lot of time going up to Tallahassee. He literally writes bills, tries to get legislators to pick him up. And this year when I went up to push this gentleman's bills, I got a lot of legislators telling me that there's a lot of fucking shit going on up here, guys. Like marijuana is the last thing on our agenda. Like I went up there, I think it was like on a weekend that they were like permitless carry was really being pushed. Right. And they're like, I can't fucking right now. I've got all this.
What we're talking about, right? Exactly.
So
I can't hear Gary unless you guys.
I'm sorry, Gary. Your microphone's fucked right now.
It went from bad to worse really quickly.
I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. but I'll
I think I know. You probably know what he's going to say anyway, right?
Well, he's probably going to say something funny. But that's the thing. Like, we were able to, it was actually kind of easy. Like, I've been in the room with legislators where like we've just like an idea has sparked, and then all of a sudden, that's great, a great idea. Veterans deserve medical marijuana cards. And but now the way politics is working in Florida, it's like marijuana kind of goes by the wayside. And long story long, we've seen how medical marijuana was enacted here in Florida. I'm not sure if you're aware of all our complaints there, Rodney, but I mean we're not exactly happy by the way medical marijuana is enacted.
I can imagine.
There's a couple on our list. The business isn't open up. You can't grow it. There's quite a bit on our list. So I said all of that to, first off, let me get your opinion on cannabis. And second, I mean, if we're voting for adult use in November, the concern is that the Florida legislature is not going to enact that in a responsible manner. Like, how high is that on your priority list to make sure?
Listen, and I'll take these in reverse order here. Anytime a progressive action is done by the will of the people in Florida, we have seen the administration slow play it into actual, uh, or to slow playing it into operationalizing what we actually wanted. Right? We
Yeah.
saw that obviously with marijuana. We saw that with felon restoration of rights. Uh, I'm hoping we don't see that with the new abortion law passed in Amendment 4. So anytime we see the will of the people really show up at the ballot box, we've seen the administration slow play the will and the want of those things. And I think that's completely unfortunate. So for me, as a legislator, really running on a people's first campaign, all of those things matter to me in a real way, right? Because I understand that those things affect my community the most and the hardest. And anytime you have people out organizing based upon things that they want, that is democracy and progress in ways that we haven't seen in a lot of other states, right? Florida really leads the way in some of these areas, and we get it on the ballot. We get people to vote for it. We have a whole victory speech, but at the end of the day, we don't see the administration apply it in the way it should be, and that goes the same for marijuana. Here we are sitting, almost 5 years after us passing it, or at least talking about it in a real meaningful way. And to your point, we're not seeing people able to grow it or open up a business associated with it. And sadly, understanding this from someone that has a master's of public administration, there's going to be more roadblocks coming, right? There's going to be more red tape. There's going to be procurement issues. There's going to be issues for licensing, whether that be occupational licenses or just different permits and things of that nature. So there's still a tough road ahead to row, and I think it takes real forthright, open perspective-seeking elected officials and legislators to see those roadblocks ahead and start writing law that helps curtail those issues in the future. I think far too often we're kind of writing law for the moment, and obviously when everything's on fire, you gotta put out the fire that's right in front of you. But I also think it's important to write laws that are going to solve issues of the future, and having that kind of foresight and perspective really makes a difference when we're talking about progressive issues. To your first question, how do I feel about marijuana? I will say this, and I'll say this jokingly. I have never had the opportunity to smoke marijuana. I have never. I was a college athlete, right? So we got drug tested all the time in college. Right after I got out of college, I went to law school and I was clerking or doing internships with the federal government and federal judges. So they were drug testing me, and then I got out of that and joined the Army. I get drug tested every month because I'm in a special operations Army unit. So the opportunity has never presented itself. I tell my wife all the time, maybe when I turn 75, it's going to be me and her out in the back porch rolling up one, but I have never had it. Well, I say that to say that there is no space in today's America for the criminalization of people that utilize marijuana. I think the criminalization of marijuana over the course of the last 20, 30, in some cases 40 years has helped us lose generations of people. And I think that's completely unacceptable.
I find it interesting. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're great.
All right, I fixed it. All right, I find it interesting that the military cracks down very hard on cannabis with the multiple testing, things of that sort. I get when you have to pass a level 3 and level 4, that makes things different. But I have also found that there is a large proportion of honorable discharges that have a disability due to alcoholism in the military.
Yeah.
And is that being substituted for the other one as a possibility?
You broke up a little bit there towards the end. I think you were saying something. You were relating honorable discharges to alcohol. Is that similar to marijuana discharges?
Yeah, is there could be a connection to the fact that they push so hard against cannabis that a lot of soldiers
listen,
retreat in alcohol.
I mean, absolutely. Listen, there's a lot of substance abuse in a lot of professions, to include the military. I can't say why someone chooses one over the other. I will say that obviously in the military, it's a very, you're an MPH. We talk about disease burden and social detriments of health. There's a lot of ways that people supplement their own depressions and stressors, and a lot of times that's turning to drugs. I will say that at least from a legal standpoint, I'm constantly talking to my soldiers. I'm a commander. I have about 100 or so soldiers underneath my command, and I will often tell them, hey, once everything's ready to go here in Florida and it's legalized, guess what? You can still not utilize marijuana. You will be removed from the military. So I really try to encourage them to do other things that really, diminish their stress levels. But to your point, it could be part and parcel of the same issue that we have. People abuse alcohol because they can't, utilize other things, and I think really that goes back to a bigger picture, to a bigger focus of kind of our national mental and physical health responsibilities.
Now, in talking, I think it was to a conversation I had with Sheriff Chronister a couple of years ago, when I was talking about the high levels of PTSD in first responders. And right now, all they're giving them basically is uh, cognitive therapy,
Yeah,
and they're still working on things like acupuncture and yoga and mindfulness and things of that sort. And I said, obviously, what you're doing is not working, because we have a number of first responders who, number one, cannot unsee the things that they have seen, and oftentimes they go from the military into law enforcement because it feels paramilitary to them, as in the bond between officers and things of that sort. And so we have people who may even have two reasons to have PTSD, who are on the
yeah,
streets taking care of folks. And we need to take care of them too, because they can do a good job if they have their minds straight.
absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I think this is half a dozen of one, 6 dozen of another. We obviously need to do a better job just with setting better culture for people with mental health disabilities in all of our professions. For when I got into the military a short time ago, it was uncommon that anyone would come to you saying I have PTSD, or I can't sleep at night, or things of that nature. So first and foremost, you need to create a culture where people feel welcome to talking about the issues of the day, or their mental health uh, transgressions. And then from there, as leaders, we got to figure out best ways to treat it. To your point, there's a bunch of programs. None of them really work that well, or at least we haven't seen them work that well. I, for one, will say that we haven't been committed in a meaningful way to those programs that really give people the help they need and deserve. I think some of that is also based upon our health insurance industry. I believe that mental health and seeking out mental health therapists, things of that nature, should be covered more on our health insurance, and it just isn't. And I think if more people understood that there wasn't going to be this burdensome cost associated with it, then they probably would do it more. So it's creating the culture. It's us as leaders creating programs that really help, that really push forward notions and narrative that seek, not only healthcare purity, but safety within those spaces. And then to your point as well, looking at alternative forms of coping with these issues. To your point, there's some people that have such a severe level of PTSD that they could probably talk to everyone. They could talk to their best friend. They could do whatever they can, and it still won't make a difference because of the trauma they've received has been so ingrained over a longer period of time that you need some sort of medication to help you. So I think it's really a three-pronged approach. We need the culture. We need real commitment to programs that make sense and are useful, and then we need the overhaul of our systems, both in insurance and medicine, so that way we can really give people the help they deserve. Because to your point, they still have value. They have a learned experience that I think should be shared amongst people as well. And I think far too often they're left out in the window.
Well, just so you know, I do have a bill that I've been trying to push the last couple of years, that I actually attached as amendment at one point in time to our employee protection bill, which prevents you from being fired or not getting a job for being a medical patient with cannabis, and saying, can we at least get a study going within one or two precincts that allows uh, law enforcement officers to utilize this as medicine for PTSD when they are off duty and they are not on call, so that they're not using during the time that they are on the street, or they're at their desk, and see if they're more productive, if they work better, or if there's no change at all, because there's automatically an impression in when I talk to Gualteri and Chronister and NACO, they all say the same thing, that they are worried that these are law enforcement officers who would not be at their best if they were using cannabis, no matter how long ago it was before they got on shift. And I'm
Yeah,
telling you, no, actually, they will have more clarity, and they will be able to do their job better, because you've got to make snap decisions. And your mind has to be straight to make those snap decisions. Otherwise, the taser comes out before they say stop.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a controversial subject.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see that one being a tough pill for many people to swallow, mainly because they see police officers messing up they're when they have cognitive balance. Policing is such it's one of it's a very difficult job to begin with.
Yeah.
And then the fact that, at least in the city of Miami, you could be 19 and give you lethal force with no supervision makes things even that much more complicated. And the ability to just take away someone's life, liberty, in an instant is something has its own special kind of flair only to the United States.
I'm reminded of a question I got once where somebody had asked me, is like, if you were to take a plane and fly across the United States, would you be comfortable knowing that the pilot had just smoked a joint? And it's a good question. I think it takes a follow-up question. It's like, well, it depends on the pilot,
right?
But for the most part, I think the way that the social norms around marijuana, even though that marijuana has gotten pretty good rap recently, is like most people will say, no, I don't want the pilot to smoke weed. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not a real good example or metaphor, right? Because we see pilots that get belligerently drunk and fly planes. We see pilots that really don't fly planes these days from a commercial space, but there's that.
I hear you, and I see what you're saying, but like, I mean, the idea is the pilot shouldn't get drunk before he
right. Right. No. So to your point, I'm not saying that someone should abuse drugs while they're flying planes. That's, of course, that's the abuse of anything while you have other people's lives in your hand is completely unacceptable. But if you got to compare apples to apples too, right?
Yeah.
So if you're comparing, the person that is completely sober, not doing anything, flying a plane, yeah, give me that guy 100% of the time. But if you add this variable of someone smoking, well, then you need to compare that across the aisle of other things that could be potentially, in danger as well. Like, you can't compare them to like the non-smoking guy. Like, that's
one question I had. You talked about the culture that's in the police departments. Does that come from the law enforcement officers or their rank and file? And we treat the rank and file differently here in Florida. They put everything on Sheriff Israel back over in Broward County, but over in Dade, you saw yourself the misuses that Mr. Ortiz was doing.
Yeah,
and he was promoted.
Yeah, that was a little different. Scott Israel was essentially, in some ways a scapegoat for obviously the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. There's a lot that he could have done there from a law enforcement perspective to ensure that, active shooter trainings and police response times were a lot better in that situation. But I mean, someone had to go down, and it starts at the top, right? And I don't fault Broward County for doing that. With Javier Ortiz, he was not the leader of the organization. He was never a police chief. He was a lieutenant, then a captain. And with police unions in South Florida and their strength, in some ways a good thing. We want to ensure that our unions are there and useful. But in the policing profession, sometimes bad cops get protected, and that was the case for Javier Ortiz. He's on his way out here, thankfully, and I think the community would attest to the same. And in every profession, there's bad apples. But I like to say, at least in policing, those bad apples can make lethal consequences that hurt a lot more.
I know that they always say that a trial will always hinge on the judge's instructions to the jury. Along the same lines with law enforcement, like for instance, when they're told, as far as cannabis is concerned, you need to use your discretion as to whether or not this person should be arrested or given a civil citation in many of the county laws across the state. And in there is a very personal decision made by law enforcement as to when it comes to discretion is concerned. Some people, they understand the mens rea situation, where it has to do with what the mindset of the person you're talking to is.
Check this. Are you sure you didn't go to law school?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just a fan. So I get asked these questions all the time, so I do the research. And
I love that for you. You got the mens rea in there and everything.
We have a men's.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
We have a mushroom law in this state that's based on mens rea, because they found a guy coming out of a forest with a bag full of psilocybin mushrooms, and he said, I thought these were just edible mushrooms for dinner. I had no idea that they had any kind of psychedelic properties. And so therefore they created the law on him saying, well, he didn't know it was psychedelic. So therefore there's no onus on him as this
There
is
you
a
go.
crime. If
Look
you
at
didn't
this.
know it was a crime, you can't charge him for it, essentially.
Look
That's
at this
what
professor.
mens rea is all about.
Yeah. In criminal law, you need what they call a mens rea and an actus reus, the mental state, and then the action that's associated with the mental state. And if you don't know what you're doing, can you really say you're committing a crime, right? Obviously, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Maybe you could be charged with a lesser offense, but you're not getting charged for premeditated murder if you didn't actually have the mens rea that is associated.
I think I understand what you guys are talking about now, and I microdose on mens rea all the time.
I love that. I love that.
But we're just worried about if it comes down strictly to discretion, you're not going to get a uniform amount of arrests based on actions. And so therefore, Carlos, who as you can see is a vicious human being, had an arrest. Kano had an arrest. Kano was getting medicine for his father at the time, right?
I had multiple arrests myself. I actually was in South Florida the first time I was arrested for marijuana. I think I was in a car full of Latin dudes, and we went to go buy weed in Carroll City, and the cops just pulled us over because they were like, "You look like you were in the wrong neighborhood." And they found like a nickel bag on me.
You should have hung out in Hialeah.
And the other time I was over here at USF.
Yeah, so to your point, Gary, obviously cops use a lot of discretion in all the stops they make, to include stops based on marijuana, and that discretion is a personal choice. And this is where we also expand the conversation and talk about implicit bias, right? It's the uncognitive decisions you make based upon your lived experience, and those personal decisions, when coupled in a system that in some ways looks at injustices from a different lens, applies a standard that's inapplicable, right? And I think when you talk about, the people within the system that have their lived experiences and are utilizing the badge, you can have consequences to that. So that's why, a lot of police departments, before it was illegal to say DEI in Florida, right? Another law. They did a lot of implicit bias trainings, and they will look towards officers and ask themselves, why did you think that way? Or why was this appropriate? It really was pushing back against the notions of discretion, right? Why is someone that looks like they're in the wrong part of town driving a certain kind of car? Why did you stop them? Well, it was based on discretion. Well, why is your discretion that way? Like, how did you grow up? Where do you live now? What were your lived experiences? Were you bullied? Were you loved? Things of that nature. And it really peels back the layers to say to themselves, well, maybe this isn't criminal. Maybe this was a bad life experience for me, and I've created a bias based upon it. So I think you're spot on, Gary, in your assessment when we look at discretion and applying it to criminal standards.
Well, in New Orleans, they have a great way to gauge whether a person should be arrested or not. It's called the brown bag rule. Basically, if your skin is darker than your average lunch bag, you're going to get arrested.
Listen, the fact that that's even still a standard is sickening. And also the fact that we reference the brown bag. I haven't seen brown bags sold in lunch boxes in quite some time. That's but I mean, listen.
I hate myself.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Obviously, New Orleans is a strange place too. When we talk about police, they actually have a police monitor who goes out to police involved shootings. A guy like me that goes to like police involved shootings right where they happen. They take notes. They talk to the coroner. They talk to the medical examiners. They create these really lengthy reports. So police oversight in New Orleans is a police monitor, which is a really interesting program. But that's an aside. I say all that to say that obviously law enforcement has some issues that we're still trying to work through, and obviously the state of Florida isn't doing us any favors in doing that. So.
Man, I'll tell you though, from the few cops I've talked to, first off, right, they actually would prefer, like, if they pull over somebody, they'd rather that person be high than drunk, right? They feel more comfortable. They know that the guy that's smoking weed is not gonna fucking flip out on them. And second, I've noticed in a lot of cops out here in Ybor City that like that the Ybor City gig, like walking the beat here in Ybor City, is kind of like the gig that you get before retiring. So like every time there's like a business liaison officer out here or something like that, they're basically coming here and they're like, yeah, like marijuana, I'm gonna retire in like the end of the year, and how do I get a marijuana card? Most of these cops are like, yeah, I want to fucking retire and start smoking weed. So here's what I say. I say we let all the cops smoke marijuana. As a matter of fact, maybe we should make it a requirement that they take medical marijuana. And then we'll get a lot less aggression from the police, I feel.
I mean, I think that is definitely a shot in the dark. You probably don't know what you're going to get based upon that. Listen, I always say, too much of a good thing could be bad too. So, if it's just open season, let all the cops smoke. It would be a strange world to live in. That's for sure.
You see, but Rodney, let me tell you, because you haven't had the opportunity to smoke.
Please tell me. Please.
Let me tell you about something called the endocannabinoid system, and its goal is what's called homeostasis. So the more marijuana, the better your body regulates, essentially. So that actually applies to everything except for marijuana. Too much of marijuana is a good thing.
So you're saying that if I had smoked marijuana, I'd probably be like some astronaut on Mars right now. And with
properties. You seem like a really healthy guy. Like I'm not saying that you're, but I'm saying that if you did smoke marijuana, you'd be healthier.
Yeah, you could definitely outdistance the jarheads that are jogging on Avenue K over in DC. But basically, what Carlos was talking about is it's not necessarily the euphoric properties that is the helpful, but the entire plant, what they call the entourage effect, which is basically the cannabinoids plus the terpenes, which are those things that create that smell that our governor hates so much. Although, as I can mention to you on the phone, I mean, if you ever been to Ybor City the day after some of their great events, like the parades and things of that sort.
The day after any day in Ybor City.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain scent of urine and other human exudates that I would love to cover up with a cloud of terpenes. That to me would be like Febreze.
I'll tell you, if you smoked weed, Rodney, you'd probably be in better shape. But,
is that right?
But you wouldn't be able to find your keys.
But you can break the Z barrier and have no knowledge that you did it when you're out jogging, as far as that's concerned.
What that is.
But it's a topic we wanted to talk about today, and as we have an amendment coming up. Actually, we got two big amendments coming up this next election out of the six. Of course, the first one, of course, is having to do with women's rights to their own medical care, and the second one, of course, is the legalization of adult use cannabis. We don't use the word recreational here because they use the same word recreational for heroin use and that kind of thing. And that's not what we're really talking about. This is not recreating. This is essentially, somebody has said that almost all cannabis use is recreational, because if you're a stressed out person and you feel better and straighter afterwards, it's medicinal at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But I can see it opening up a can of worms, because there's so many things missing from that amendment that would need to be in there to be properly implemented. And when I was in Detroit not too long ago, that's where I came from. Back in the day, they had this thing called stress officers, where they had two guys that were armed to the hilt that would go down the streets and basically were walking armies. And it created a certain sense of fear of law enforcement that is still ingrained in Detroit today. Yeah, you're right, James. And what I found that right after the state of Michigan went with it with full adult use legalization, I was over there in Greektown, which is near downtown Detroit, and they were dragging people off who were saying, "What are you doing, man? It's legal now. Why are you dragging me off? Why are you arresting me?" Well, first off, he was being arrested for smoking in a non-smoking area, which was the restaurant zone. But also, nobody told them that the day after it was not elected into law, that it would not be enforced yet. And so we're going to have a lot of issues in regards to how people perceive things are happening once they hear that all of a sudden in Florida it's going to be legal. Absolutely. Because number one, we still have a rule right now which makes it so you could go out, buy something at a legal shop, light it up on the sidewalk, and be arrested right there because of the fact that you are smoking in an area that has no public use. The only public use is available in the state of Florida is if you are currently in a house that either you own or you have permission from the owner to be able to smoke in that facility.
Yeah.
Which really does narrow it down to our tourists who don't normally go to people's houses.
Right. You saw the same thing happen in Brooklyn recently too, right? So it's some of this is just the education of the law, right? You know, anytime a new law gets passed or a new restriction gets passed, those that be the special interest groups try to go out and educate the people on, you know, how to comply with the law or how the standards of society have then changed. I think it's important for shows like this and other elected officials to get out into the community to talk to people so that they understand what's going on. But I also think it's incumbent on law enforcement and our state attorney's offices as well to do the same level of education. And far too often, I think far too often sometimes people operate in the gray area and they utilize discretion in ways that could be more criminal than actually educational and showing people how to comply with the law the most effectively. As it relates to Amendment 4, I know you said that on the early part, obviously reproductive freedom, women having the right to utilize their bodies the way they think is appropriate is something that hits home close to me. I think this is also, as you know, obviously 2 MPHs. This is a public health issue. You know, my wife and I, we went through 2 miscarriages before we had our first son, our 2-year-old, and those 2 miscarriages were performed as DNCs or you know, or as medical abortions, right? So there's a whole bunch of like healthcare safety related to reproductive freedom that I think some people are now starting to talk about, especially when looking to, you know, grow and have a safe family. And there's also obviously the more traditional understanding of it as well, and allowing women to have the freedom over their own bodies. So I think it's important to talk about this from all angles of the spectrum. And I think leaving out any components of this is a disservice to all the citizens of Florida. I really think that this issue is one of those issues that cuts across political spectrums. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, you're mostly probably in favor of women having reproductive freedom.
Not just reproductive freedom, but medical freedom. It really does come down to that because sometimes it's not necessarily about reproduction, but just in the fact that the health of the mother often affects the health of the child.
Correct. Not 10 times out of 10. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
my wife tells me daily, if I'm having a bad day, Rodney, you're having a bad day too. And I say, yes, ma'am, I'm having a bad day.
I did my master's thesis over at Johns Hopkins. I name dropped. Sorry. My master of public health on the infant death rate in Cincinnati in the over the Rhine area.
Oh, nice. I like that. That's a good one. Good one. Look at you, Gary.
And it came down to the fact that we weren't just talking about the health of the current generation, but the generation previous and the generation previous to that, as far as being able to have access to reproductive health as well as healthy lifestyles. So if you have a family that, you know, 3 and 4 generations they're having preemies, there's something going on there within the family structure, within the social determinants of public health, as it were, that made things go awry.
I love this. That's a good one. I wish mine was that interesting. You know, I did mine on like vector-borne diseases and geopolitical warfare, but that one is really good, and it's applicable to things that matter. You know,
mosquitoes for geopolitical warfare. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, no, I did it on vector-borne diseases and geopolitical warfare.
Yeah, I got automatically went straight to the Zika mosquito.
Oh, of course.
Can you militarize that?
Of course, yes. What do you mean? You saw it.
You're so cute.
We won't. That's a different story for a different day.
Rodney, you're probably gonna go down in history as like the rotation guest that's most impressed by Gary Stein.
Yeah, that and the fact that I think we have to do everything we can to get Latipo out of office. And I'm saying this out of absolute love for public media and absolute disposition for someone who's in charge of public health and yet doesn't understand public health.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I often joke that we don't have a public health program here in Florida, and we really don't comparatively to other states. And I think it does everyone a disservice. You know, when we really talk about city sustainability and city resiliency on a municipal level, it's all public health. I look at public health even in my police work with criminal justice reform. It's far too often we're placing issues in the buckets of the courts and criminal justice reform, but really these are all healthcare issues. It's disease burden, it's social detriments. We could live healthier lifestyles in ways that reduce our stress, that don't make us get sick and utilize our healthcare system, or makes us do really hard life decisions based upon just where we're growing up and how we're living. Not everyone has the advantage of winning the life lottery and being born into wealth, or being born into healthy living relationships. So we need to do a service to those people as well, in ensuring that they have the best foot forward. And I think far too often we're not doing that. In Florida, as I joked about earlier, the only thing that raises faster than sea level rise is home insurance prices. And we got to stop doing silly things. We got to start making law that helps real people and solves real issues.
Okay, so Rodney, I've got a couple of questions to ask you.
Let's do it.
The first off, I just want to say I'm sorry to hear about the unfortunate situation with you and your wife, and the
thank you.
miscarriages and all that. I want to get back into politics, though. First off, Ron DeSantis has come out saying that he's opposed to this bill, to Amendment 3. Part of the reason, you can basically sum up why he said he was opposed, was because it's going to lower our quality of life. It's going to smell like marijuana everywhere. And then the Republican Party of Florida, after all those comments, came out saying that they're opposed to this bill as well. I want you to react to that. It seems more like they're playing, we get a lot of guff on this show that we're just pushing Democrats.
No, exactly.
But it does end up at the end of the day like becoming a partisan issue. There's a lot, and there's a lot of Republicans that believe in the legalization of marijuana. They believe in personal freedoms like that, and they believe in small business and all that.
Yeah.
But politically, Republican leadership has long time been opposed to this. I have a sneaking suspicion that they're particularly opposed to this because they want to get the least amount of Democrats to the polls this coming election. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say if that was their goal, then they're not doing themselves any service in order to do that by talking about it in this fashion. I feel like it would engage voters to come out more so, unless they look to saying no to engage the ultra right of their party to come and vote not in favor of it. Between Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, I really do think they're nonpartisan issues. I think obviously in some cases it may increase voter turnout across the board, but I think we'll be hard pressed to know if those will be Democrat or Republican votes. Just looking at this from an academic place, I think there's a lot of people, to your point, Carlos, that agree with both of these things, and yet they may have a way different value judgment based upon how they raise their families or how they feel about climate change and things of that nature. But I think between marijuana and reproductive freedom, I really do think it cuts across the political divide. As it relates to Ron DeSantis' comments, as you stated earlier, obviously he's baiting and misconception as always. I feel like the Republican Party of Florida has often kind of waded in this fear mongering of doing things or saying things that just doesn't make sense. They'll have you believe that someone's going to smoke some marijuana, walk right up to you in your face and blow it directly in your eyes or in your nose or something. Like, it's just they find the craziest things to bait. And honestly, it doesn't have to be this way. Yeah. You could be against marijuana in a way that maybe seems more practical and not as crazy, and get the same amount of support. I think by and large, there's a lot of Republicans that are in favor of Amendment 3. Obviously, it made it onto the ballot. Those petitions just didn't appear out of nowhere, right? Right. So it's something that I think everyone's affected by, whether it's they smoke marijuana or had friends that smoke marijuana or seen friends and family criminalized based on marijuana. It's something that's been such ingrained within our culture in America for a long period of time. So I think obviously once again, the governor and obviously some Republicans are missing the mark.
So in an effort to be more bipartisan, right? We talk.
Always say the devil needs no advocate, Carlos.
The devil needs no advocate. We touched on Ron DeSantis and all that, and on a national level, the Democratic Party seems to be trying to push for scheduling to Schedule 3. Have you heard about this? The Biden campaign trying to push to Schedule 3?
I have. I haven't read all the details about it, but like I've seen like the headline tweets about it, of course.
So our organization, I believe we're in favor, right, Gary? Like we're in favor of going to Schedule 3?
With a certain amount of caution, because it opens a lot of floodgates to things like pharmaceutical companies taking over the cannabis business. But on the other hand, you'll be able to get an actual prescription as opposed to a recommendation from a doctor to be able to buy it over at CVS, and they may have better deals than Trulieve. Sorry to tell you guys, but that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is the accounting issue for us MBAs out there who worried about the 280E form, which basically allows you to deduct your cost of goods sold, which was made basically for heroin users to deduct the cookers and things of that sort.
Listen, I mean, you don't need me on the show, Gary. You don't need me. You got it. I don't need to say nothing. I mean, that's the main issue with things becoming a Schedule 3. I think President Biden is looking at this as a half measure and saying, well, something's better than nothing. But really, you're opening up the floodgates of pharmaceutical companies, really cutting out the people that have literally been locked up for years doing the same thing that Johnson & Johnson will likely do if move to Schedule 3, which is unfortunate.
Florida is very big on half measures, also unfunded mandates. Case in point, the ability to give former felons the vote. They had to go ahead and screw that up by filling in that piece that was not in the original bill that would force them to pay off restitution to the state.
Yeah, you know, the felon restoration of rights thing was the best of times. It was the worst of times, because when you actually read that ballot initiative after, I could see someone easily making the argument of that your sentence is not done until you're done paying all of the fines and restitution to the court, right? And, you know, I like to think that people that are writing these things are a lot smarter than me, but even I saw that like, there's some gray area here, and they're going to exploit that. Obviously, we saw it there. We'll likely see it with marijuana. I feel like we saw something similar to with like Greyhound racing a few years back. There's always something that comes out of these constitutional revisions that leaves much to be desired. I will say that I don't have that position with Amendment 4 as I do these other ones. That one seems pretty airtight, and I'm optimistic about that.
Well, just so you know, there are some issues we do have with Amendment 3, although we're still pushing it forward because it will, if done properly, and that's a big caveat, reduce greatly the amount of arrests for simple possession in the state of Florida.
Yeah,
all the counties that have ordinances for civil citations, we still got a ton of people still being arrested and their lives being essentially ruined for simple possession.
Listen, you know they're going to move the ball again, right? The simple possession is only simple possession based upon the quantity of what you're holding, right? And that quantity can change as the wind blows. And that's the unfortunate truth about any progressive movement. If it's not done in a way where the big players can get, and I hate to sound too conspiratorial here, but if it's not done in ways that the big people can get a part of it, they just move the ball to keep criminalizing it in different fashions, which is the unfortunate truth. I
always tell folks who are running for office that if they intend on winning, they should go to the tailor and get suits with larger pockets, because when they get there, these envelopes are kind of constantly being slid towards you with cash in them, and you got to put them in.
Listen, not me. I do not want to go to jail. I don't think I would do good there. I wouldn't do well there. You know, I like my life. I like my two boys. I like being in the military. I just don't want to go to jail. I tell my campaign team all the time, listen, we're creating a campaign that you can literally pick up and put anywhere in this state and win an election. And we feel that we're able to do that because we're keeping people first. We keep the issues first. You know, for me, it's really every city, every vote. I don't care what your value system is. If you're willing to have a conversation with me, I'm willing to talk to you. And I'm going to keep it that way as long as I'm elected, in part because my wife won't have it any other way. And I like coming home to her. And the other part of it is I wouldn't look good in orange. Like, it's not a good look on me, guys. It just ain't going to work.
But some counties use orange and gray stripes if you like the horizontal stripes that are that wide.
It just isn't good. Like, you know, I was a philosophy major undergrad, right? Surprise.
Hey, I was in philosophy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, college about to you know, Foucault the Foucault and the panopticon effect. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to be a part of it.
You're like you could have like a crazy conversation with like every member of our board of directors.
I probably could. That's not uncommon for me.
Which is good because we like educating legislators. We like to legislate to educate. That way we don't have to worry about calling ourselves lobbyists, which we aren't because we don't make any money off of this.
Fair
We
enough.
just feel that education is a pillar
Education is key.
of society. And I think one of the people who need to be educated the most seem to be our legislators, because the stuff that's coming out of Tallahassee, it does not look like it came out of a solid K-12 education.
Well, Gary, it's a part-time job, and there's barriers to entry for all of us. I will say that me doing this is a complete sacrifice. I'm doing it because I feel like I believe in the best of us, and I think in times when they're hard, good leadership is called by the moment. So I'm just here to do my small part.
So, Rodney, where's District 35?
So District 35 is all of West Broward. Essentially, we go as far north as Davie and Sunrise up to the Panther Stadiums. Go Panthers, by the way. We go as far south as Miramar, Pembroke Pines. We go as far east as Hollywood. We also include Weston, Southwest Ranches, and Cooper City. We go as far west to the Everglades. So
yeah, dude,
it's a very diverse district.
You're my old stomping grounds.
No, it is.
Graduated Flanagan High School.
Okay.
Drag race on US 27.
I heard he used to hang out.
I graduated from Broward Community College and Nova Southeastern University.
Okay, my wife went to Nova, got her MBA from Nova.
Yo, she's in the School of Business all the way.
Go Sharks! You guys do like some weird shark things.
Sunrise swap shop.
Hey, your wife see that stock ticker at the front of the building? By the Graduate Business Students Association. I did
that was from you. You did that. That was your graduation gift.
That's what I did. Now there was like we should be concentrating on ending the show, but there was like this organization, the Graduate Business Student Association at Nova, that was like funded for like $100,000. I found out about that, and I was just like spending money left and right.
Jeez.
It's also my first like bevy into politics.
There it is, and look at you now, Carlos. Look at you now.
Look at me now. Over here, chillin'. Rodney, it was great talking to you, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'd like to hear, though, as we're closing out here, first, what is your platform right now as you move forward in this candidacy?
Yeah, really, our platform is three main issues. The first thing I'm calling economics for the dinner table. And the reason why I call it that is because I feel like in most families, even if you're not a traditional family, if you're just by yourself, typically you think about the issues of the day when you're sitting down and you're eating. I know in the Jacobs family, the first thing that comes to mind, obviously with two kids, is that daycare is way too damn expensive, right? So for us, really for us in the campaign, that is really getting down to the brass tacks of the issues that matter to Floridians the most, and legislating those issues away for people is where our main focus is at for our economics, whether it be occupational licenses for small businesses, ensuring that people are able to go to work within an efficient time due to traffic so that they can make a livable wage for their families, really working with people to understand, workforce development and things of that nature, really leading with economics of that kind of mindset and solving the issues based upon those principalities is what's super important to us. The second important thing, obviously, as someone with 4 degrees and 2 school-age boys, is education that promotes prosperity. And that's not just education that looks to send kids to college, Carton Hall, or just looks to test people until they turn blue, but really putting forward good education that looks at the quality of life for people, that looks at the educational systems that sets people up for success. I obviously am a Black man, no surprise there. I have 2 Black boys. So when I heard that, we were going to be teaching that slavery had benefits, that was a full stop for me. And really as a hard focus on education and curriculum that promotes prosperity. The last part, which is kind of a double-edged sword, obviously an NPH here. So sickness prevention is what I'm calling our healthcare focus. I know a lot of people say, healthcare for all, but some of that has its nuances. So for me, it's all about sickness prevention science, disease burden, really looking at how our systems make people more sick, reducing those levels and stresses and burdens, and ensuring people live healthier lifestyle. The last part, obviously, is environmental protection. I said it earlier, the only thing that rises faster than sea level rises in South Florida is our home insurance premiums. All of that is part and parcel to our environmental issues. A good portion of this district, obviously, is the Everglades, protecting the Everglades, ensuring that we have just the right progress or the right principles and legislation in place to protect people from air quality to sea level rise. And I think that's really the foundational components of our campaign. No matter who you are, I think those three things are important to families and people that call Florida home.
Oh, fantastic. I think we should also get you to talk to Steve Edmonds rather. He's a libertarian, but he's still a nice guy. And unlike the guy that Carlos went to college with, Augustus, but that's another story altogether. But he's going on the premise of the fact that hemp is a fantastic mitigator of water quality. In fact, they used it at Chernobyl to get the heavy metals out of the soil and clean the area there. And that's precisely what could be done for Lake O.
Listen, the fact that we're still talking about
everything else.
Yeah, the fact that we're still talking about clean water in 2024 is a travesty, right? In Indonesia, they figured out ways to take out salt out of their water that's more clean than some of the water we drink here in America, which is just wild to think about.
And we hope that our hemp farmers get a chance to utilize the plant in every means possible. That includes building infrastructure to help make paper and all the other products that hemp can do. But right now, there's no move to fill that infrastructure, so they're pushing strictly just the cannabinoids and things of that sort, which is again getting ready to get shut down on the state and the federal level. So we're hoping to see those things fixed.
Yeah, and I think some of those things can be fixed with just the right kind of collaborations. I think far too often, especially on the left, we kind of sit in some of these echo chambers, and we obviously, for good reason, take the moral high ground. Personally, I'm interested in winning. I value winning over being right. And I think as long as you have obviously a good moral floor and understand that there's some things you can't compromise on, but with good collaboration, you can get a lot of success and wins.
And I hope that we can collaborate because that is so important. On the federal level, we brought Nancy Mason, and I thought it was a fantastic interview. I got a lot of flack from it saying, why did you bring this ultra-conservative crazy lady on? And I'll agree that we didn't agree with a lot, maybe 92, 94% of her policies, but she was right on in regard to her cannabis policy, and she was working with a Democrat to push that bill forward. And plus the fact that she was the first female graduate of the Citadel, which I thought was very impressive.
Pretty impressive, yeah. Listen, I'll say this. Listen, if you're not making some people angry or upset at you here or there, you're probably not doing your job the right way. So you can't make everyone happy here.
Well, I make Gary mad at me every week, so
there you go.
Good job.
There you go.
Yeah, just because of that, he constantly keeps on telling me that in South Florida they know how to make Cuban sandwiches, and in Tampa, especially the West Tampa sandwich shops where I hang out all the time, they don't make it right because
listen, you gotta
in Tampa you can actually
get. All right, Rodney.
Go ahead.
Here's the thing.
What's up?
Right, you're from South Florida. You know what a Cuban sandwich is. All right, salami and Cuban sandwiches, yes or no?
I'm gonna go with no. It's a no for me.
So did you know that every year the best Cuban sandwich is here in Tampa? Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and I'm assuming it has salami in it.
The best Cuban sandwich in the world, and you know where people judge it? Where? Here in fucking Tampa, just by like fucking third generation Italians telling them that they know everything about.
I don't believe
Cuba.
it. I don't believe it.
Right?
They tried to make a Pizza Hut in Italy too, and that didn't last long. So
they got this weird inclination that they didn't have things in Cuba, that they just had like ham and pork. Because like there's this story about how like the Cuban sandwich was like the coming together of all these different countries. So like Swiss cheese, German mustard, French bread.
Listen, typically we try to romanticize our food, but oftentimes it comes.
That is a plate.
And I try to explain to these people the concept of there was this company that was like a horrible company, but it specialized in trade called the Dutch Indian Trading Company that literally had all these fucking spices, and they brought mustard over to Cuba.
Look at Carlos, the historian. Good for you. Good for you.
I was just saying, right now the Cuban Sandwich Festival is going on, and nobody from Miami is invited.
That's fine. Listen, we got good Cubans down here. We don't need any of that South Florida or that Central Florida, Cuban sandwiches mess. Like once again, as I mentioned, they tried to also build a Pizza Hut in Italy, and that didn't work out well. So if you guys come down here, with this salami toting Cuban sandwich, you're probably not going to have good business either.
Yeah. There's a reason why they don't invite people from Miami. But on that note, I think we're going to have to end the show.
Absolutely. Best way to end it.
But I gotta come down there. I'll meet you at Calle Ocho. Maybe we'll go to the Versailles and actually pay for our meal.
See, that's where everyone goes for their Cubans, but that's where all the tourists go. If you come into Calle Ocho and you're going to Versailles, no knocks on Versailles. We love Versailles. We love the people there. We love the food there. But there's some more local shops that got some good Cubans too. Cuban sandwiches, Cuban cigars. You're gonna have a good time.
Actually, I hang out at the Ventana and get the little cordialitas and listen to these guys talk about how great the Republicans are. And I go, really?
Yeah. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
So let me just say, if you know how Cuban sandwiches are made and you believe in the legalization of marijuana, especially the legalization of marijuana in the state of Florida, you should probably join Suncoast Normal.
I probably should.
Gary,
I'm going to go do the membership thing. I mean, I believe in Cuban. The only thing I disagree with that little hit, I saw what you tried to do there. I agree with how Cuban sandwiches are made without the salami. So everything else you said is spot on.
I'm not saying it's a coincidence, but we backed Tom Keene in the 35th district of the House, and we got that ducksucker to flip. So you're the 35th district of the Senate. So
35 to 35 is where it is.
And Tom is a member, and you're more than welcome to be a part of Normal. We push, like I said, all the good legislation. We try to get all the names and faces to the table on both sides of the aisle, or if you can include the Libertarians, the 2.5 sides of the aisle.
Well, listen, I'll join. Carlos has to get the next question right. He had all the questions. I got one question for him. Right, now that I know he's a philosophy major. I need to know your favorite philosopher and your favorite philosophy book. There's only one real answer to this, so we'll see. Let's see if you can get it right.
There's only one wrong answer to this?
There's only one.
Wagner.
My favorite is Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling.
Okay. I'll rock with that. That's a new one. People typically go with like Nietzsche or something. So the fact that you went there, I'll go with that. I'll rock with that.
Well, I go with Kierkegaard because like a lot of people, I love Nietzsche, but it's just like Kierkegaard had like this like strong thing on like faith, and especially in that Fear and Trembling. And technically reading about how cautious I should be about faith in Fear and Trembling, even though he intended to get people to become Christian, turned me into an atheist.
That's an interesting take on it. I mean, it's all. I mean, when it really boils down to it, it's all the metaphysics, right? It's all Aristotle in some way. Like, what is reality? What is faith? What is the first mover, right?
I hear you. I hear you. It's either trying to build on Aristotle or just put Aristotle on his head.
On everything else, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that you actually read The Plague.
That I what?
The Plague, Jean-Paul Sartre. It's on existentialism.
No, I haven't read that one. I've heard of it. I haven't read that one. Really existentialism for me, it's all about Immanuel Kant, right? To an extent, but I feel that.
How is it all about Kant with existentialism?
I mean, really, I think Kant really looked at the existentialist from his what do you do first? Do you look at yourself first into doing goods, or do you have the outward projection of saving like a baby that's about to drown, right? So for me, that's existentialism at its finest. Like,
I hear you. Like before Kant, it was all trying to be like justify the church, and then Kant like was like, we don't need that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like he believe that some people could be good in their own hearts.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the existential, or can be. For me, it's Plato's Republic, Philosopher King, favorite book.
And that's why you went into politics. All right. So, Gary, one last thing. Gary, what do you get when you join Suncoast Normal?
Well, you get this fantastic pin that you can wear on your lapel of a cannabis leaf. If you're worried about the audience around there, tell them it's a maple leaf and you're from Canada. Otherwise, you can go ahead and talk about cannabis all you want to everybody who asks you about it. You also get a card which says you are a member of Suncoast Normal, and you can join us in the fight. because we go to Tallahassee, we put together these things like lobbying days and things of that sort, where we push all the bills and amendments that would be pertinent to making this a better program for the state of Florida and for the people inside of it and the people who visit it. We do things like we want reciprocity, which means you don't come here on vacation and leave on probation. And people don't have to worry about getting arrested at TSA by sneaking in cannabis in their sock, and so they have like legs the size of cantaloupes, right? And we also have the employee protection bill to keep you from losing your job, the patient protection bill, which keeps you from being kicked out of a hospital or old age home or off the organ transplant list for being a medical patient, the parent rights protection law, which keeps you from losing your kids because you're using cannabis medically, which actually makes you a better parent. We also have a reduction of or increase of qualifying conditions that makes it easier for you to get a medical card, regardless of what kind of condition you have, because there are very, very few conditions actually on there, only 10, whereas things like sickle cell anemia and autism are still not even on the list as being things that are available. And yet we know that cannabis actually works for those kind of things. So we move on with that. And of course, there's a home grow bill, because for some people who need a certain strain they can't get at the store or it's too expensive for them, if they can grow it in a private area where there's no dispersion of your product except for to you, then that's important to the patients of Florida. We're all about the patients, not about the profits. Sorry, big guys. I know you put a couple $1 million into this having a store in Florida. The fact is, it's the little guy, the people who actually make the purchase, that are the most important person, and not you.
And tune in every Sunday where we bring you great guests like Rodney and we talk about what matters.
And you're being primaried, correct?
Say again?
You're being primaried, correct?
Correct. So it's really a primary race. It's a Democratic seat. If I win the primary, then victory party on me in South Florida, guys.
And that primary is what, August?
20th. August 20th.
August 20th.
And I am going to move back just so I can vote for you.
Thank you. Tell your friends, family, come out and vote. Obviously, it's a crucial election. Vote for me. I'm confident that we'll be victorious. So let's do this.
And thank